In the beginning, before language was born, before thought took form, there was only silence. Out of that infinite stillness came the first vibration, the word through which all things were made. And that word was not spoken in noise, but in consciousness. God imagined, and it was so. Creation was not the product of sound, but of awareness. The voice that formed the worlds was not heard by the ear, it was felt by the Spirit. And that same power dwells within you now. The same silent force that holds galaxies in motion beats in your chest and breathes through your lungs. The same divine intelligence that spoke light into existence waits behind your thoughts, waiting for your agreement. But man has forgotten. He has filled his days with noise, with endless affirmations shouted into the void, with desperate prayers spoken in fear, with explanations and justifications that drown the whisper of God within. The secret of manifestation has never been in saying more, but in saying less until your very being becomes the prayer. Say nothing and get everything. Not because silence itself gives, but because in silence you return to the source that already gave. The power you seek is not in volume, but in vibration. When your mind becomes still, truly still, you align with the divine frequency from which all reality is born. This is why Scripture says, "Be still and know that I am God." Psalm 46:10. Not think about, not strive toward, not plead with, but know. That knowing is the highest form of prayer. It is the state of consciousness where your desire and its fulfillment are one and the same. You speak no words, yet all creation moves to obey. You make no effort, yet the universe rearranges itself in your favor. To understand the power of silence is to understand the nature of God. God does not shout, He wills. His word is not sound, it is substance. When you realize that you are made in His image, you begin to understand that your greatest creative act is not in speaking, but in being. The world trains you to react, to explain, to justify, to argue for your limitations. It tells you that manifestation comes through hustle, persuasion, or endless repetition. But truth whispers another law. Creation moves not through noise, but through knowing. Every miracle that has ever been recorded began not with shouting, but with inner certainty. When Jesus stood before the storm, He did not argue with the wind. He did not plead with the waves. He simply said, "Peace, be still." Mark 4:39. And the sea obeyed. Why? Because the external must mirror the internal. The storm recognized itself in His stillness. And your own life, this means pausing before you react, letting your calm speak louder than your defense. This is the secret most never learn. Your silence is not emptiness. It is alignment. It is not weakness. It is authority. When you speak less, but no more, your words become law. They carry weight because they are born from stillness, not fear. The man who has mastered silence has mastered creation. He has ceased to argue with the shadow world and begun to shape it from the unseen. He no longer explains himself, for he knows that the unseen already understands. Every time you remain silent, when your lower self wants to react, you declare mastery. Every time you refuse to explain your worth, you acknowledge that it is self-evident. Every time you stop chasing validation, you create space for divine confirmation. Silence is not passive. It is active containment, the gathering of spiritual power before expression. Just as the seed must rest beneath the soil before it sprouts, your desire must rest in silence before it manifests. The impatient mind wants to dig it up, to check its progress, to speak of it to others for reassurance. But the silent one knows. What is real does not need proof. You are never rewarded for noise. You are rewarded for knowing. Quantum physics now echoes this divine truth. It tells us that particles respond not to words, but to observation, to focused awareness. The observer collapses possibility into form simply by knowing. In silence, you become the observer. You withdraw attention from chaos and fix it upon completion. And because attention is creation, the unseen becomes seen. This is why the prophets withdrew to mountains and deserts. It was not isolation, it was concentration. They understood that the voice of God speaks not in thunder, but in whispers too still for the restless mind to hear. Elijah learned this when he stood before the mountain. There was wind, there was fire, there was earthquake, but God was in none of them. Then came a still, small voice. 1 Kings 19:11, 1-2. When you enter silence, you enter that same voice. You do not need to hear words. You need only to feel alignment. The silence of the awakened mind is not empty. It hums with divine intelligence. It is the womb of creation. Imagine for a moment the space between your thoughts. That gap, that breath of nothingness, is the door through which God enters. Every time you quiet the mind, you open that door wider. You are not making something happen. You are allowing what has always been to express through you. To say nothing is to stop interrupting the divine process. To be silent is to declare trust in the unseen. You no longer ask, when will it come? You simply know it is done. And from that stillness, manifestation flows with mathematical precision. The people, the circumstances, the events all move into alignment effortlessly. The same force that guides the stars now arranges your destiny, not because you commanded it loudly, but because you harmonize with it quietly. This is why Jesus taught that prayer should be done in secret. When thou prayest, enter into thy closet, and when thou hast shut thy door, pray to thy Father, which is in secret. Matthew 6:6. The closet he spoke of was not a physical room. It was the inner chamber of consciousness, the place of silence. When you pray there, you are no longer speaking to God as if he was separate. You are speaking from oneness with God, in the language of being. In that sacred inner silence, you are not hoping for your desire, you are embodying it. You become the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and because feeling is the language of the subconscious, creation must obey. Silence is the bridge between the invisible and the visible. It is the moment where imagination ceases to be fantasy and becomes reality. When you sit in stillness, imagining with feeling, you are creating not someday but now. The world will call it coincidence, but you will know it was consciousness. There is a strength in silence that the loud cannot comprehend. To the unawakened, silence feels like surrender, but to the awakened, silence is dominion. It is the invisible command that speaks without words and moves without effort. When you stop explaining, stop defending, stop pleading, when you can hold your peace in the midst of misunderstanding, you are no longer living as a victim of the world, but as its master. Every time you react to negativity, you reinforce it. Every time you argue with limitation, you multiply it. But every time you respond with silence, inwardly grounded, inwardly certain, the false dissolves, for it cannot exist without your attention. Energy flows where attention goes. Withdraw attention from fear, from judgment, from gossip, from doubt, and you starve them of life. Place attention upon faith, upon vision, upon gratitude, and they multiply. Silence redirects energy from reaction to creation. You will begin to see that silence is not retreat, but rule. It is not absence, but awareness. The one who has learned to be silent has learned to hear the voice of God in every circumstance, even in seeming opposition. And as you grow in this understanding, you will find that silence begins to speak for you. You will walk into a room, and people will feel your presence before you speak a word. Opportunities will unfold around you without you needing to ask. You will manifest not through effort, but through energy. This is the great paradox. When you stop reaching, everything reaches for you. When you stop proving, life begins to prove itself through you. To say nothing, then, is not to withdraw from the world. It is to anchor heaven within it. It is to live as one who no longer moves by external noise, but by internal knowing. Look at the life of Christ. When accused, he answered not a word. When doubted, he did not argue. When threatened, he remained silent before Pilate, not out of weakness, but mastery. For he understood that truth needs no defense. The light does not explain itself to the darkness, it simply shines. So too must you. Let your silence become light. Let your quiet confidence speak louder than your words. Let your inner knowing become your evidence. And as you dwell in that sacred stillness, a subtle but profound transformation will occur. You will begin to notice that everything you once chased begins to come to you: ideas, people, opportunities, clarity. Life begins to feel like a mirror reflecting your inner calm. The storm subsides when the sailor stops fearing the wind. The world calms when your spirit does. And yet, this silence is not achieved through force. You cannot make yourself silent. You can only allow silence to arise by releasing resistance. Each time you let go of control, each time you release the need to be understood, Each time you surrender your timeline to divine timing, silence deepens. And with it comes power, not power over others, but power over illusion. In silence, you see clearly. You see that nothing has ever been missing, that every desire is already complete, that the outer world is but a moving shadow of your inner state. You understand that manifestation is not creation from nothing, but the revelation of what has always been. All that you seek is already finished in consciousness. Silence is the key that unlocks it. And so you stop speaking about your desire. You stop asking for it. You stop doubting it. Instead, you feel it, you know it, you become it. And then you rest, not in indifference, but in divine confidence. For in the silence of true faith, there is no asking, only receiving. The universe speaks fluently in silence. It understands vibration, not vocabulary. When you hold the vibration of fulfillment calm, certain, thankful, you are already speaking the highest language of creation. The greatest prayers are unspoken. The deepest miracles are birthed in stillness. The loudest answers come through quiet minds. So if you find yourself in a season of silence where no doors seem to open, no voices seem to answer, do not despair. You are not being ignored, you are being refined. The silence around you is an invitation to return to the silence within you. For when the inner world aligns, the outer must follow. God moves most powerfully in silence. The seed grows unseen. The sun rises without noise. The heart beats without fanfare. Life itself is a symphony of silent miracles. So be still. Stop speaking to convince. Stop praying from fear. Stop explaining your worth to those who cannot see it. Instead, dwell in quiet assurance. Let your faith become your voice. Let your peace become your testimony. Let your silence become your magnet. And soon you will see, without striving, without shouting, without struggle, that everything begins to choose you. Not because you spoke louder, but because you aligned deeper. You will say nothing and get everything. Not because you earned it, but because you finally remembered. You and God were never separate. Creation was never outside of you. And silence was never emptiness. It was the presence of everything you've ever desired, waiting for your stillness to receive it. So be still, beloved soul. Know, and it shall be done. And as you rest in that holy quiet, you begin to feel something shift, not in the world around you, but in the center of your being. The mind that once scrambled for control begins to soften. The heart that once ached for recognition begins to open. You realize that silence is not the absence of movement. It is the presence of peace. It is not still because nothing is happening. It is still because everything is happening perfectly. The Spirit moves most powerfully when you cease to interfere. For all your striving, all your anxious affirmations, all your desperate prayers were never to convince God, they were only to remind you of God's presence within. But now you know. Now you are certain. And in that certainty, words become unnecessary. For the first time, you understand what Christ meant when he said, "Your Father knoweth what things ye have need of before ye ask him." Matthew 6-8. You were never meant to beg. You were meant to believe. To speak in silence, not through the tongue, but through the heart. The universe does not hear sound. It feels vibration. It responds to faith, not to fear. And so you breathe slow, deep, surrendered. You enter the temple not made with hands, the inner sanctuary of consciousness. There, in that infinite expanse of stillness, you find that everything you've ever prayed for already exists. The love you sought, the peace you longed for, the abundance you worked for, it is all here, quietly waiting behind the veil of noise. You understand now that silence is the womb of creation. It is not what comes after manifestation, it is what precedes it. The moment you can hold your desire in stillness without doubt, without needing proof, the world begins to move to confirm it. You do not have to make it happen. You only have to stop preventing it. Every great creation follows the same pattern. The idea is conceived in silence, carried in faith, and born into form. The oak tree grows not by effort, but by surrendering to its own design. The seed does not question how it will become a forest. It simply rests in the soil, trusting that its nature cannot fail. You too are a seed of divine consciousness. Silence is your soil. Faith is your root. Stillness is your sunlight. You have spoken enough. You have declared, affirmed, and asked. Now it is time to receive. Let your silence become receptive rather than resistant. When you are silent with trust, you are no longer empty. You are full of divine expectancy. You are listening to the whispers of spirit, to the invisible hands arranging your path. Even science has begun to echo this truth. Physicists tell us that energy responds to coherence, to order within the field. When your thoughts, emotions, and intentions align in stillness, your entire electromagnetic field becomes harmonious, and reality must mirror that harmony. The Bible spoke of this long before quantum theory. A double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. James 1-8. Silence unites the mind. It gathers scattered energy into focus. It heals the division between desire and disbelief. You may have thought that silence meant doing nothing, but in truth, it is the most powerful form of doing, because it is being. When you learn to be still, you learn to command. The power that once leaked through endless talking, explaining, and worrying begins to crystallize within you. It forms into conviction, and conviction moves worlds. You become like the calm center of a storm, unmoved yet commanding movement in everything around you. You begin to notice that when you stop trying to convince others, they begin to believe. When you stop demanding outcomes, outcomes begin to unfold. When you stop reaching for what is not ready, what is ready begins to reach for you. Because silence is not withdrawal, it is magnetism. The Christ-conscious mind does not chase, it attracts through alignment. It does not plead for what it knows is finished. It simply rests in the truth, and because the truth is alive, it manifests itself. To say nothing, then, is to stand in the authority of divine order. It is to walk as though every prayer has already been answered, because it has. It is to look at what the world calls absence and see only gestation. It is to bless the unseen, knowing that the unseen is the cause of all that is seen. The more you practice silence, the more sensitive you become to divine movement. You begin to perceive subtle guidance, a nudge, an intuition, a knowing. The outer noise no longer disturbs you because you have tuned into a higher frequency. The voice of God no longer thunders. It hums within your awareness like light itself. The greatest masters of creation have always spoken little. Their words are measured, their tone soft, their presence commanding. Why? Because their authority comes not from speech, but from consciousness. They carry the silence of God within them, the silence that does not argue, does not defend, does not rush. The world's noise cannot touch the one who dwells in divine silence. Gossip, judgment, fear, these things pass through them like wind through still water. For in silence, you become transparent to illusion. You no longer resist, you reflect. And what you reflect is only truth. If you want to live in miracles, dwell in that silence. Cultivate it. Guard it as sacred. Speak less, listen more. Imagine richly, then let go. Let your imagination carry the image of your desire into the silence of faith. Then, without announcement, it will appear, not as a surprise, but as the most natural unfolding. You will not gasp in disbelief. You will nod in recognition. You will say, "Of course, it could not have been otherwise." That is the quiet confidence of divine manifestation, the knowing that what you hold in silence must one day take form. So the next time the urge arises to explain yourself, to prove your worth, to fight for your dream, stop. Remember, truth does not defend itself. Love does not beg. Light does not shout to be seen. The very act of stillness is faith, and faith never goes unrewarded. You are the image of the infinite. The Creator's power rests in your imagination. The word that formed the worlds is waiting for your stillness to speak again, not through noise, but through knowing. Close your eyes. Breathe. Let silence fill the space between your thoughts. Feel the pulse of the divine moving quietly within you, steady, timeless, certain. This is creation. This is prayer. This is power. Do not disturb it with worry. Do not rush it with impatience. Do not dilute it with explanation. Be still. Know. Allow. And when you open your eyes again, the world will have shifted, not because you shouted for change, but because you became change in silence. The sun does not announce its rise. It simply appears, and darkness disappears before it. So too will your manifestations unfold quietly, inevitably, in perfect light. You will say nothing, and everything will answer. You will make no noise, and every door will open. You will stand in silence, and creation will move to meet you. Because in the end, silence is not emptiness, it is completion. It is not withdrawal, it is return. It is the moment you remember that you and God are one, and that all things are already yours in the stillness of that union. So rest now, beloved soul. Stop explaining, stop asking, stop seeking. Be still, and know, truly know, that it is done. And from that divine silence, watch as the universe bends to your belief. Watch as heaven unveils itself through your stillness. Watch as everything you've ever desired comes quietly home to you. And now, let all striving fall away. Let every thought that once shouted for attention grow quiet in the light of this knowing. For silence is not the absence of life, it is the fullness of it. Every breath you take, every beat of your heart, every pulse of creation around you, all of it moves within this eternal quiet. You are standing at the center of everything you ever desire. There is no need to reach for it anymore, because the moment you became still, the moment you surrendered the noise of wanting, the universe recognized you as ready. In silence, you have become one with your answered prayer. Feel that now, that deep hum of certainty that asks for nothing and lacks nothing, the stillness that does not wait because it knows, the peace that passes understanding because it was never meant to be understood, only felt. For this is the mystery of divine creation. It was never noise that moved mountains, it was awareness, the still awareness of one who knows. When you say nothing, you align with that awareness, the mind of Christ, where word and will are one. And in that stillness, life begins to unfold with sacred precision. The things that once resisted now come easily. The doors that once felt locked now open before you with grace. It no longer argues with illusion. It simply knows. And from that knowing flows miracles. So when you rise tomorrow, rise differently. Do not fill your morning with noise. Sit instead in quiet remembrance. Before you speak a word, feel your alignment with the infinite. Let that stillness shape your tone, your step, your gaze. Walk as one who is guided, guarded, and grounded in divine certainty. Because in truth, the universe does not respond to your words, it responds to your state. The stiller you become inside, the louder heaven moves on your behalf. The mountains move not because you command them with force, but because your stillness has already dissolved them. The obstacles fade, not because you beg for removal, but because you have remembered they were never real. This is the secret that all mystics discovered, the secret that science is only now beginning to echo. Consciousness is the cause of everything, and consciousness finds its greatest power not in speech, but in silence. When you say nothing, you are not withholding expression, you are perfecting it. You are allowing divine timing to ripen what was already finished in spirit. You are acknowledging that creation is complete, that the world is not something to fix, but something to reveal. So be at peace. The silence you have entered is not the end, it is the beginning of all beginnings. From it, new worlds will rise. You are not a beggar of blessings, you are the vessel of them. You are not waiting for miracles, you are the miracle unfolding in time. So rest, trust, be still. Let silence finish what your words began. And when all is quiet, listen closely, for in that sacred hush, you will hear the sound of creation bowing in obedience to your belief. In your silence, everything will have been spoken not in words, but in truth, because the silence of one who knows is the loudest sound in the universe.